Right, David, the decision's been taken today. Just give us your reaction. Do you think it's the right call? Are you in favour?
Yeah, I'm absolutely so. I was quite surprised actually that it was announced so early. As you may be familiar, they've given themselves the deadline of May the 7th to allow everybody to make a decision. But it seems from the announcement that the majority was so huge already in favour that they decided to announce it early, which I think is really, really good, because now we all have clarity of at least part of the decision's been taken, but it allows us to do a lot of things and get on with, shall we say, a part of our next life.
They've said that promotion and relegation are under careful consideration. What would you like to see happen?
Well, I think that the main thing is that we are given options on various things. I think there's obviously been mooted and as points per game is one. Wearing my selfish filed hat, I wouldn't be in favour of points per game. The other option, of course, is null and void. And then there's various other sort of options, combinations above that. I think that in a situation where there's 9 games still to go, it would be terribly unfair to decide relegation based on that. Although I think there's some merit in having promotion. And I think that with a little bit of creativity, and I've made some suggestions myself to the league on that, as I'm sure every other chairman has, I think there is a way forward to do it. And the National League has that ability, we as a league, to do that ourselves. So I'm hoping that the result will be fair. I did say at the time we voted, I've sort of led the charge, shall we say, to get the season wound up. I started over a month ago campaigning for this, so I'm very, very pleased. But I also recognise that, I could be almost like a turkey voting for Christmas, I suppose, to use that expression, in that if they do go with points per game, then Fylde would be relegated. But I've always said that I thought that we should all make a decision was what was best for the whole league, and there's a lot of people in serious trouble at the moment with finances. So I'm glad it's happened, and I look forward to seeing what the alternatives that we're going to get to vote are.
Do you need clarity sooner rather than later on those alternatives so that you can start planning for next season, so that you know which league your team will be playing in?
Yeah, well, it helps, doesn't it? I think I've always sort of maintained that we will be driven, or our decision really will be determined by what the Premier League decide, and I think that applies to the EFL as well. I think the Premier League, if they don't complete, and it looks highly unlikely, and I think there's more and more people realising that, they'll certainly protect themselves and their members. They're not going to relegate the bottom 3, I don't think. I'd be very, very, very surprised. And therefore, it sort of cascades down, because that stops promotion and relegation in all the other leagues. So I think our league will probably sit and wait as long as possible to see what happens. And I think it probably makes sense at the moment. We don't need to necessarily make too many decisions at the moment. Certainly within, I would say, the next 2 or 3 weeks with regard to players and things like that. But I think it's worth waiting to see what happens, and it might make their decision easier. There is, of course, a unique situation in so much that Bury, of course, as we know, were expelled from League One, and therefore technically there's a place available from the National League. And I think it would be unjust if somebody didn't get that place. I've suggested that it would be fair and reasonable to have a playoff between the top 2, Harrogate and Barrow, at a neutral ground behind closed doors. And I still feel that that's probably a fair way. I'm sure that Yeovil and Notts County and all the people in the playoff positions vehemently disagree with that. But I feel that would be fair to both those clubs.
So what about the possibility of the playoffs? Would you be happy if they were scrapped and it was just the one team promoted?
Yeah, I think that's one of those options that I said to you, that I think that if there's a position available, you could still go with effectively a null and void, but say that because you are kind of allowed to write your own rules in a club, so to speak, and alter them as the situation dictates. And this is a very unusual situation. So I don't think it would be wrong to scrap the playoffs. I think having the playoffs makes it very complicated, because again, people could argue, well, we would have got, if you go for points per game, just to give you an example, Stockport County are currently in the playoff places. If you go points per game, immediately Barnet get that place and Stockport lose it. So it's difficult, and I think it's easier and fairer just to have the top two teams at the moment in a one-off playoff. I think it's also safer, and we've got to consider safety and the logistics of doing all these things. And that would be certainly my, should I say, if I had a vote or I was allowed to write a proposition, that would be mine.
And just final question, do you think this early decision will help save some clubs financially in the National League? Does it protect the future of some of these clubs?
Listen, we're in totally uncharted waters. Again, I've been sort of beating the drum for a long time. The big problem we've got, doesn't matter whether it's the Premier League, EFL or National League, the big problem we've got at the moment is contracts and resolving this contract issue. We've all got, zero income at the moment. Some of us, a bit luckier than others. They've got benefactors. They've managed the money well. I saw Burnley was saying that they're in great shape. They've always managed the purse strings well. But there's a lot of clubs will be in serious trouble if something can't be sorted out with players' contracts. And I think that you'll see some real fallout of that, not just in our league, but in League One and League Two above. And I certainly am familiar. I'm not going to mention any names for obvious reasons, but I'm very familiar with certainly where there's conversations taking place at 3 or 4 clubs now, which have huge implications for the very survival.